Today we're going to be solving sides of a right triangle using trig ratios. Find the length of x to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. So tenth means you want to find it to one decimal place. So keep that in mind when we are finding our final answer. Now the next step is to write the mnemonic SOHCAHTOA. So let's write it. SOH for so, CAH for ka, and TOA for toa. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Spelling is so important. All right, so now looking at our triangle, notice they've given us these two sides. So these are the sides that we're actually going to label. So don't bother labeling all three sides. We really just need to label two sides. And this right here is our angle of reference because that's what they've given us. So let's label it according to that 28 degrees. Okay, so the side that's right across from the 28 degrees is our opposite, or O. And the side that's right next to the angle is our adjacent, or A. So we've been given side O, the opposite, and side A, adjacent. Now where can you find that on SOHCAHTOA? Right here, the TOA, O and A. So we're going to use tan to solve this triangle. So we start out by writing tan, and always write the degree next to it. In this case, it's 28 degrees. And because O comes first, you're going to write that on top of the ratio. And A comes second, so that's going to go at the bottom of the ratio. Next up, let's fill in the values. You can really skip to this part right here. So O happens to be X, and A happens to be 9.2. At this point, we are actually going to cross multiply these two ratios. So I'm just going to put a 1 at the bottom of tan of 28. And now let's cross multiply. So 9.2 times tan of 28. So I'll write it like this over here. Okay, so that's on one side. And on the other side, I'm going to multiply 1 times x, which is really x. Now, x is already isolated, so I really just have to multiply these two together. So using your calculator, let's do that. 9.2 times tan of 28 comes to about 4.9 centimeters. And this right here is your final answer. Find the length of x to the nearest hundredth of a meter. So we are rounding our answer to two decimal places. So start the question off by writing SOHCAHTOA, because that will help us find which function we need to use. And this is our angle of reference, so let's label everything according to that angle. The side across from the angle of reference is the opposite, or O. And the side across from the 90-degree angle is always your hypotenuse. So we've been given the opposite side and the hypotenuse side. So can you find O and H somewhere on SOHCAHTOA? Right over here. So that means we are going to have to use S for sine. Start off by writing sine and the angle beside it, which is 66 degrees. Now O comes first, so that's going to go on top, and H comes second, so that's going to go at the bottom. Now let's plug in the numbers. So leave sine of 66 as it is equal to, O happens to be 5.6, and H happens to be X, so that's going to go at the bottom. Now we cross multiply the two ratios. So let's put a 1 at the bottom here. And I'm going to start out by multiplying X with the sine of 66. So you can write it this way as well. This basically means you're multiplying them. And 1 times 5.6 is just 5.6. Now notice on the left side, the x is not isolated. It has a sine of 66 beside it. So to get rid of it, I'm going to have to divide this side by sine of 66 and also divide the right side by sine of 66 degrees. Now on the left side, because you have sine of 66 degrees on top and bottom, you can cancel them and you're left with just plain x. And the right side, we can't cancel it, so we are actually going to have to calculate that. So using your calculator, let's do 5.6 divided by sine of 66 degrees. And when you do that, you should actually get something around 6.13 as your answer. And the units is going to be meters. So this right here is your final answer. Last question. Find the length of x to the nearest centimeter. What that means is that our final answer will not have any decimal places. It's going to be a whole number. So start off with SOHCAHTOA, and the angle of reference that they've given us is 48 degrees. So now let's label sides according to that. Starting off with the 90 degrees, the side across from it is always your hypotenuse, and the side that's right next to our angle happens to be adjacent. So they've given us A for adjacent and H for hypotenuse. Can you find that in SOHCAHTOA? It would be right here, the ka. So we are going to use C for cosine. So again, start out by writing cos of 48 degrees. And because A comes first, we're going to write that on top, and H comes second, so we're going to write that at the bottom. Now let's fill in the values. Cos of 48 degrees is equal to, A is 22, so that goes on top, and hypotenuse is x, that goes at the bottom. Now we're going to cross multiply. So I'm just going to put a 1 at the bottom right here. And let's take the x and cross multiply with cos of 48 degrees. So x times cos of 48 degrees. And on the other side, 1 times 22 is just 22. Now the x is not isolated. There's a cos of 48 attached to it. So to get rid of it, I'm going to divide this side by cos of 48 degrees. And the right side is also going to get divided by cos of 48 degrees. Now on the left side, you have cos of 48 degrees on top and bottom, so you can cancel them, and we're left with x. Now this side, we're actually going to have to calculate it using our calculator. And when you do that, you should get about 33 centimeters as your final answer.